Yeah, I'm going to start off with Thryn talking about snow in video games. Hopefully you mentioned the number, otherwise I'm going to lose my shit. I'll take the second one, so please do yours. Thanks, Phil.
I don't know how close I can hold this. Apologies if I super rush you this. It just goes to video games. This is not good fun. The first thing about this talk is I am a big old baby. So I super hate horror games. I really, really hate them. I mean, it's kind of a love-hate thing because I really like good narrative design, and that's quite important to a lot of horror games. But I hate playing them. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to pay a whole bunch of these to do a talk about horror games. I can't just watch Let's Plays, that's not going to work. So I'll play the ones that seem gentlest and see what I can find in the first 10 minutes that mean I don't have to really get to the super scary bits. So I looked at environment, because environmental design is pretty much my big area of study and what I do. And as I was playing through all of these games that I thought I could probably handle, there was one thing that came up like a whole bunch, and that was snow. So this is just a selection of the baby horror stories I played. It's Harley, Year Walk, Penumbra, Black Snow, Dead Space 3, Flash Frozen, Cryostasis, Silent Hill again, and then a wee called First Mountain. That one was weird, do not recommend. But I thought, okay, this is quite a big number, and it's a bit weird to me, because I would have thought snow was particularly inherently scary. There's nothing terrifying about it. So I thought about other games that had snow in, and what came up was it was still being used in sections where maybe I should be feeling fear. So I thought this is definitely not a coincidence at this point, because even these games that aren't horror games are using it in sections where I'm meant to feel a bit horrified. But why? If we look at snow in general, in case you've never seen it, here it is. Wow! Okay, this is not very scary. I mean, personally, I don't know about you. If you are terrified, I apologise. But this is quite gentle. It's lovely snow and a lovely hut. And if you put that situation here, that's not great. That's not a place I want to be anymore. I mean, obviously there is blood on the floor, which is like the big one. But even still, if it weren't there, I'd probably be feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And I think what I thought might be the case is that snow is a really great blank canvas, like quite literally super blank. And so you can augment horror any way you want with it, essentially. Because the idea of a horror game isn't just to scare you in specific ways. It's to keep a low-level state of anxiety and dread and fear so that you're always a little bit on edge. And a big way to do that is through your environment. So snow as an environment has got some pretty good qualities for horror. Have it just catch up, so I've got my notes. There we go. One big thing you want from your environment is information that is useful for you to play the game. Things like, where am I? All of those look pretty similar, because snow covers things over. It covers landmarks, and it covers paths, and it covers pretty much anything you could use to navigate around an area and know pretty much where you are. So instantly, you've got this ability to confuse players, which is pretty great if you want them to be frustrated and scared. But there's other information that you get from snow. The big one here is what's not there. I mean, what is there is a lot of blood, and that is obviously quite worrying. But it gets more worrying when you realise that's a lot of blood and no footprints. Where did it come from? Unless an eagle is carrying around a bleeding corpse, something a bit weird is going on. So there's a lot of information that you're not processing straight away. What you're processing straight away is, that's a lot of blood. What you're not processing is, there is no one else here, unless they leave no footprints, in which case that is equally as worrying. And also, I don't know where I am. Super not great. What you can get, as well as visual information though, is its other properties with sound. So, I can't visually show you sound, but these are two games that used it quite well. And that's The Long Dark, which is not a horror game, it's just survival, and Hide, which is a horror game. And both of them use snow in sound effects quite well, because snow is like a big old cushion just everywhere. So it muffles sound really, really well. And there's a thing that we really don't like, and that's called source delocalization, where we can hear something, but we don't know where it is. And a good way to do that is by muffling sounds. So you don't hear something until it's really close, and at that point you don't really know which direction it is, just that it's there really soon. And snow's a really good way to do that, because as well as muffling the sound quite literally all the time, there's a lot of other sounds that you can put in. Because what most people don't realise, but that you can throw in, is snow makes a sound. Both of these games have falling snow. And what you can do if you've got falling snow visually, is you can put a layer of white noise in that muffles other sounds. And it's not going to sound weird, because we're used to sort of hearing that when snow is falling. It doesn't make a noise, we just don't register it. Another thing that does make a sound that we don't like as well though, is ice. So some of the games I looked at weren't specifically snowy, they were just icy. And The Long Dark has big sections of that as well. And we have a bit of a trope, you'll see it in horror films as well. Or I guess just films with ice. That as it melts and shifts, it will make a big ass crack. And that echoes and reverberates. Don't laugh. That was not an intentional pun. And that reverberation is another source delocalization, and we really don't like it. And it also makes us jump a little bit. No one likes to jump a little bit because it sets us on edge. And being just that little bit on edge is like the perfect starting base for horror games. There's other sounds obviously as well that you can use to cover things up. Hide does really well with the crunch of footsteps. Everywhere you walk is really loud, you can't hear what's going on. You've got wind obviously with a lot of snowfall. You've got your own breathing, which becomes quite heavy when you're very cold. So you can obscure sources of sound in the game really well. And it's again with the same as covering over locations and covering over navigation points. We don't really like not knowing what's going on. And so having snow itself isn't inherently scary, but having snow hide things that you want to know about, that is quite worrying. This is Dead Space 3, and this is The Last of Us, the DLC. And unfortunately I couldn't get a good picture of the second one, because it was quite late at this point. But what these two are showing is space. A really, really good thing about designing horror games is having a big, really, really open space. The opposite to that is corridors. Really narrow corridors we don't like either. We don't like not enough space, and we don't like too much. We like just sort of perfectly in the middle. And snow does too much really well, because of what we can see in the first one, that Dead Space 3 image. Because it just blends into horizons. It's a thing we call prospect space, and it was coined by, and I've got his name because I'm not going to remember this, Rand Hildebrand, apparently. But what that is a spatial condition where we know that there is a big open space, and we know that it holds potential threats, but we don't know anything more than that. And that makes us pretty nervy. And Dead Space 3 did it really well because it used snow pretty optimally, which is, if it's snowing, it's probably pretty cloudy, it's probably pretty misty, it's probably pretty grey. You can make pretty much everything look the same. So you have no idea how far away things are. And there's a kind of monster in Dead Space 3, which is, if you've not played it, like a big spider thing. It's huge, it's massive, but because of all the mist, you won't see it until it's about this far away from you. And that is not great. What's scary is the spider, but what sets you on edge before that is not seeing it coming, and also not hearing it coming all that well. So what we're doing is, we know that snow isn't scary, but we know that it hides things that are really well. And if we put players into a position where they know they're going to be scared in the future, hiding how and when makes us really upset. What it also does, and this is just a little bit of an aside, is if you are feeling fear, a big physical show of fear is cold hands. That's something a lot of people get when they're feeling like dread or they're feeling anxious. They get cold hands. And if you get cold hands when you are playing a snow-based game, that throws you really into it in an immersive sense. So you get more afraid, and your hands get colder, and you get more afraid. It's like a vicious cycle from which you can never escape until you turn the game off and make hot chocolate. Which I did after all of these. The second one there is a term coined by Splinter Cell's development team, and that is shadow space, which is where you use shadows and highlights to split one big space up into distinct areas. And you can't see it super well because I've cropped it, but what there is here is shadow all around the edges, and then highlight right in the middle where you want to draw attention. And Snow does that really well, obviously, because it is white. It is very reflective, and if you want to highlight something, you just put a light on it, and it's like, bam! It's glowing, it's right there. Shadow space is really easy to do with Snow. So it's a really good environmental choice if you're not great at setting out areas. If you've got a big scary library full of dusty books, it's quite hard to highlight something unless you have 12,000 lamps in one corner. But if you're outside and it's snowy, it's really easy to just really clearly define the different areas. And that puts us on edge as well, because as long as you've played at least one game in your whole life, you know that when something is highlighted, something's going to happen. Probably not going to be great. Unless it's a present, but it never is. So here are some things we do not like. We do not like knowing we are alone. And Snow gives us that really, really well. We don't like knowing that things are going on, and we're not alone. And Snow does that as well. If you have a big, wide open space and you put some footsteps through it, when you've just been in there and there were no footsteps, nobody likes that. We don't like a distorted perception of space. We like to know where we are, and we like to know how big it is, and we like to know what is in that space. And Snow can hide all of those facts. We don't like muffled audio. Snow muffles audio really well, and it comes with its own array of audio to cover up other sounds. We don't like too much white, and this is because culturally, we find huge expanses of white quite, I'm going to say cold, but I mean sterile and unfeeling. And so if you go into an environment and think, even the floor doesn't like me here, you are not in a comfortable space. We don't like the discomfort of cold, and that's pretty basically obvious. We don't like knowing that the environment itself does not want us to continue living. We don't like knowing that we are out in the snow and our feet are really cold and there's no lovely house anywhere and it's windy and we might get frostbite and die. None of that is fun, which is why it comes up a lot in survival horror. But we have that low level knowledge even just in any horror game. We know that if we are trying to survive, snow is not great. It stops us running really well. It makes it slippery and it hides things. It covers up pretty much anything that would be useful to us when trying to not be eaten by monsters. We don't like it. And what is very, very important for horror is having a situation that you believe could happen. So, most of us, I'm going to imagine, understand that snow is real. That's the thing that we know. Being in a field full of snow has probably happened to most of us. That's the thing that we understand as well. So if you put us in that and then add a threat on top of it, we go, oh, that could actually happen. Oh, I've actually been in a dark field and it was snowing, it was a bit creepy and I didn't like it very much. So it's something that has happened to us and was fine, but that we know could have been not fine. Very few people have been in an abandoned asylum, underground, underwater, that is also on fire. All of the things that make things really, really scary, but not super believable in games. Most people have been outside, I assume. So does it make us very cold and frightened? Yes, pretty much. We are not a big fan. So the thing is that snow isn't scary. No, it's not scary at all, it's just frozen water. But what it is it's a really great environmental tool to highlight things that are scary, to hide things that might make us feel a little bit less scared, and to keep us constantly on edge for when the big scares do happen. Because no one is using snow in a game to try and make you wet yourself from fear. No one thinks that's going to happen. But what it might do is have you on the edge of the seat just a little bit, so that you're worried for when the fear does come. And that's the basic principle of an environment for a horror game, because you want people to never ever feel comfortable. However, just in case you're not convinced, I have a final theory, which is that snow is tiny ghosts. So choose whichever of these theories you prefer. Who am I giving this to?
You should probably ask if anyone has any questions, but
Does anyone have any questions? Snow-based questions, obviously not like personal.
Do you think this also worked in 2D games as well, before the whole 3D gaming took off?
Yes, I do. I mean, Tide is technically not 2D, but because it's so pixely, it essentially could be. It works very well there. And what I did kind of look at a little bit was like HoloLight as well, things like Don't Starve, isometric games. And it works pretty much the same there, because it's not about being a super immersive environment, essentially. It's more about what information it does and doesn't give you, and you get that same information in 2D or 3D regardless, I think. Anyone else? Good?
everyone should probably clap for Thryn now.